Ghost Hunting in New England,
your favorite spooky podcast. Hello and happy Wednesday! Welcome to Ghost Hunting in New England with your host Amelia.
And Beth.
And yay, Beth, you're back!
I am. I had a fabulous vacation.
What'd you do?
I went to Prince Edward Island to visit my mom because she lives up there. And I had some very interesting conversations about whether or not her house was haunted. I looked around for a bunch of different books on hauntings and hung out with my son and my friend Julie and her daughter Lily. And then we came home. It was cold and it was rainy and I heard it was 95 in Boston. And now that it's 95 in Boston, I kind of wish I was back there.
It is hot. It is very hot. It is very humid, and I am looking up to buy a fan for my apartment, which I still don't have a fan.
How do you not have a fan?
I don't know. I've lived there a year and a half. And
do you have an air conditioner?
No.
How are you not dying?
Well, the cat is not happy about the situation, so I promised her I'd go get a fan tonight.
Oh, yeah. My cats are, sadly, just pathetically laid out on the floor in the kitchen, and they just, stretch out as far as they can, trying to be cool. It's not working.
Yeah, no, Lydia's not happy with me either, that's for sure.
Do you put ice cubes in her water?
She does not like that.
My cats don't either, and I put them in there anyway.
Yeah, no, she gets very, very annoyed about that when I do that. I've tried for years, and she's not having it. Every time we move, I try again, and she's like, just cut it out.
She's particular, that Liddy.
She sure is, just like her mama. Today, we are talking about something that we brought up on, what was it, Ghost in the News 2?
I think it was Ghost in the News 2, yeah.
Ghost in the News Part 2, and that is ladies in white, or women in white.
A woman in white, yeah.
Which is a very common story that you can find all over the United States, all over the world, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to us like just about every community kind of had one of these stories, so we went to go a little deeper into it. We picked out a couple of stories here. We did some research into why we have those stories, similarities between all those stories, things like that. So we're going to get into that right now.
Cool. Starting off with sort of the historical overview of the idea of ladies in white. In general, they fall into three different categories, and they're all associated with a tragedy. But you either have a woman who was young and died tragically, you have a woman who was murdered, or you have a woman who lost children. And ultimately, these phantoms, these figures, these ideas come back and they are wandering the earth looking for some sort of closure before they can move on to the afterlife. And so no matter where you're hearing these stories, you're going to find, if you had a checklist, it's going to be a woman, obviously, because it's a woman in white, right?
Yes.
It's either going to be young and died tragically, murdered, or has lost children. So you could almost, if I was teaching this in one of my classes, we would have a checklist, as we're going through, is this a woman in white story? And we would be able to check the boxes of every one of these stories as we go through.
Now, one thing to me that's kind of interesting, isn't that most female ghosts?
Well, typically people who are ghosts die. So yes.
Check mark there.
Okay. Most women historically have had children.
Correct.
And the only two ways really to die are to either die young and tragically or old and possibly murdered.
There are a few variations I could think of in between those two, but I'd say, yeah, if you're going to be a ghost, typically, I think the traditional thing is, you have some kind of unfinished business.
Yes.
And typically it was a tragedy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can, for the most part, consider most deaths a tragedy.
Yes.
But like a sudden happening and or a suicide.
Right. So it's some sort of traumatic event that has happened and left that energy imprint that we talk about sometimes.
Lady in White stories to me are interesting in that a lot of times it does feel like one of those time loops we talk about of energy being stuck. What is very interesting about Lady in White stories is that they tend to, in many cases, interact with people more, I feel like.
Yes, definitely.
definitely more than your average ghost. There is a direct communication. There is oftentimes touching. There's a lot of times getting into cars.
Yes.
Because most of these, and not all of them, most of them happen on kind of the side of the road type thing, or
Usually
by a bridge.
in a rural community.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's usually a lot of that going on. So I think that's kind of what makes them a little more interesting. And I don't know. I don't know. Does that make them easier to believe or less likely to believe? Because they are. I mean, it is a difference between most hauntings we see. This isn't a ghost who's turning your lights on and off. This tends to be a ghost on the side of the road trying to like hitchhike, trying to talk to you. Maybe you will experience car problems, and that's when you see them. I mean, so right. I don't know.
But there is that attempt at somehow getting you as the live person to notice them and to really pay attention.
Yes.
In my kind of like research about, like what's going on with the women in white culturally as this cultural phenomenon that goes back hundreds of years. What I found out was that just in passing really quickly, in medieval England, if you saw a woman in white, it was an omen of death. That she was almost like the angel of death coming to see you and let you know it's time to wrap your stuff up.
Interesting.
So that the woman in white was not a positive thing in medieval England. In Holland and Germany, however, women in white are considered to be healers and gentle spirits. So in Germany, they would typically appear at noontime in the bright light, and they would be like stunningly beautiful. And they were just a very gentle spirit who was there to just kind of guide you through the day. In Holland, they would come at night in graveyards, and they were believed to be the spirits of recently passed healers in the community.
All right, cool. As a healer, I support this.
Okay.
Totally support it.
Well, would you come back all dressed in white to let people know that you're still here to provide healing guidance?
I might. I always tell people in my life, like, yeah, if I were to, I mean, isn't that a joke I always say? Like, if I die, Beth will come find me? Like,
have you told that to other people?
Yeah, of course I have. I say it all the time.
Hopefully I'll know where to look. Yeah. I will. You'll be out at that little primitive hut thing that you're going to build.
I'll be at my primitive hut.
Right. I'm going to move kind of out of Europe for a little bit, but at the end I'm going to come back to some Slavic mythology. But then as you came to the New World, in Mexico, they have La Llorona? How do you think I say that?
I don't know. I'm not looking at the word. What's the word look like?
L-L-O-R-O-N-A. My Spanish is horrible.
Double L is a Y. So La Llorona.
Okay.
La Llorona.
La Llorona. All right. So the myth of La Llorona was a woman who wanted to be married to this man, but she had children from a previous husband, and he wanted no part of a woman who had other children. So she took her children.
Oh, this doesn't sound like it's going to a good spot.
No, this is going to a horrible spot.
Oh my gosh.
We're ghost hunters. They don't usually have happy stories. So she takes her children to a large lake in town and drowns them.
Why do people keep doing that? Someone just tried to do that last week up here.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did. Well, you were on vacation. Yes.
I don't know. I'm desperately trying to remember the name of the woman in Texas who did that.
Yeah, well, the woman in Massachusetts last week did the exact same thing. 3 kids in a car drove into a reservoir.
On purpose?
Yes, very much on purpose. Luckily, someone saw, police came, kids are fine. They're not with their mom, who is now in jail. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no. I mean, it definitely happens. It happens a lot.
Was she doing it in order to get rid of them, in order to be with some guy who was not interested in having children?
No, she was looking to get rid of everybody.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's too bad.
I know. But luckily someone stepped in and now everyone's safe.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right. So, and those kids are permanently scarred and traumatized and...
Well, there's that.
Yeah, that's just, the whole thing is just awful.
But we love a good comeback story. That's their time now.
That clap was really loud. Watch the spikes on the thing when you do that.
I like it.
Okay. So after she murders the children, she goes back to the guy and is like, hey, problem solved, you and me. And he's like, yeah, you're nuts. I don't think so. Please go away. And then she goes back and she drowns herself in the lake, which you would think that would be the end of the story. Except
We're talking about a ghost hunting podcast. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So she goes to heaven and she is stopped at the pearly gates and they ask her, "Where are your children?" And she's like, "Oh." And they send her back. So she's doomed to roam the earth looking for her murdered children. So she's out there wailing, crying. She yells, "Oh, my children," in Spanish. I have no idea how to say it. And she supposedly kidnaps children. She's like a jack of all terrible things. Yeah. So there's that kind of woman in white story.
All right.
In Japan, they are called, and no, I don't know how to say this. I'm just making this one right up.
All right.
Yurei. Y-U with a straight line over it, R-E-I. And unlike the very benevolent, helpful spirit guides of England, the Yurei of Japan are vengeful, and they are attached to objects, so they follow objects around, and they will attack people who try to interact with the objects. So yeah, women in white in Japan, not fun.
Japan has a lot of, and I haven't researched it enough, and I'd really love to, but their whole culture around spirituality and like spirits is fascinating.
From what I know of it, yes, I would agree with that.
Yes, totally different than what we think. A lot of it really does make sense, but it's a very interesting culture in that regard, and in many other regards.
That's kind of around the world, and so coming back into Europe, in Slavic mythology, their myth of the woman in white usually involves a young woman wandering in the fields, and she comes upon people, quite like in Germany, right in the heat of the day, and she carries with her a big scythe, and she'll ask people questions or she'll try to attack them, and if you don't answer her questions correctly, then she strikes you dead, she cuts your head off with the big scythe, or she'll set madness on you. So it seems like it was an easy and convenient way to explain heat stroke in the middle of the fields. That like suddenly you'd be out there in the middle of the day and it's really hot and you're kind of losing your mind because you have nothing to drink and you see this kind of bright white spot in person and then you're just kind of go nuts.
Yeah.
Because you have heat stroke.
Right.
Right? And so that's part one of the Slavic myth. The other half of the Slavic myth is that parents on the farms would tell their children about this woman in order to keep the children away from the valuable crops. So don't go out and play in the fields because the woman in white might get you.
I like that. That's tricky parenting.
Yeah. How you had to keep your kids entertained before there was Fortnite?
There you go.
All right, so that's kind of some basic woman in white ideas and stories from around the world. And Amelia has been kind enough to bring us some stories from here locally that she's going to tell us about, and we'll decide what we think of them. We'll check the boxes here. Should we make a checklist?
Sure.
All right.
So my first one comes from Route 26 up in Maine, and that's by Poland, Maine, where we all get our water.
Poland Springs.
Poland Springs.
Excellent.
Best water around. So there's the Maine Lady in White, which I just said, on Route 26. And so the common thing everyone says is that she is between the ages of 20 and 25. She's dressed in all white, and she appears to need help. So there are 3 different stories surrounding her death of what people think who she is and what happened. So story 1, she's the murdered bride of George Knight. She was slashed to death in 1856 in her farmhouse along Route 11.
Who killed her?
George Knight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She wanders up and down surrounding roads looking for a ride, as she is said to have a warning for anyone who picks her up. Story 2. She was a young...
Wait. What's the warning?
It's different for anyone.
Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
they're individualized warnings.
Yes, yeah.
It could be things like use your imagination.
No, even though that wasn't a warning they gave me. Beth and I went to go see a mentalist, and he gave me a card, and he's like, I don't know who writes these, and I don't know who they're for. Spirit just sends it to us. And I got one. And he gave it to 2 people in the class, and everyone else, he's like, if you guys want one, give me $5. But I got one for free, and I was so excited. And Beth and I ran to her car. Where were we? We were in downtown Boston, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, in downtown Boston. And we climb into Beth's car, and I rip open my letter because it's like, read it when you're alone and blah, blah, blah. It just says use your imagination. And I was like, what the